Hello, I am Martha Rabright, and I'm a senior early years family practitioner for Beyond Autism. I'll be talking about tolerating skills and how do we practice this throughout the session with our families. And later on, you can see some families' experiences on the video. Tolerating routine procedures. So for children with autism, sometimes they can display unusual or strong fearful responses to common routines and procedures, for example, when they visit the dentist or when they need some Vaseline on their lips or when they need to take a medicine. Obviously, this is very important to work on it so we can make sure that they're okay when they need life-saving procedures and they don't get extremely upset or anxious when they're going to have a haircut. How do we tackle this during the sessions? Research has shown that graduated exposure combined with positive reinforcement can be useful in helping children with autism to tolerate these routine situations. Also, with the use of visuals, that can be really helpful for some children. And of course, the more practice, the better and the quicker the success. What do we understand by graduating exposure? Well, presenting the fear stimulus going from easier steps to more complex or increasing the duration. Later on, I'll be going through some examples and I'll explain all of these more in depth. And what do we understand by positive reinforcement? It'll be when the child receives a reward, and in this case, for tolerating the fear stimulus, making that more likely to happen again. Graduated exposure and positive reinforcement together, how do they look like? So we'll be breaking the skill down into gradual steps. We'll be rewarding our child for tolerating each of those steps. We'll be gradually increasing what is required of your child, reinforcing each time and increasing the reinforcement with increased response effort is necessary. All of this is, for example, they don't tolerate the haircutting, so we can start with very simple steps like having the clippers out, then tolerating the clippers being on, not necessarily on their head, maybe getting the clippers on and vibrating in their elbow or in the belly and then move up to the head. You are increasing, you have brought down the skill in gradual steps. And for example, for the first step, which would be just tolerating the clippers being on site, you might just give a social praise or give them some tickles. But when the child actually has the clippers and he is tolerating them on their head, you might need to reinforce with a sweet. Also, it is important to persevere until they're able to tolerate the whole skill and then fade out the reinforcement gradually. Let's see all of this in an example. For example, haircutting. In order to have a haircut, your child needs to tolerate actually loads of steps. Firstly, he needs to tolerate being sitting down for a short period of time. Also, he needs to tolerate someone touching their hair, the sound of the clippers, the vibration. If we take them to a hairdresser, it's a completely new place, a new person, a new face. So we need to take into consideration all of this. And when we are going to start working on hair cutting, we'll want to consider not all of that, but make it individualized and specifically to our child. So for example, we know that it's really difficult for them to put the apron, hence it'll be very difficult on the hairdresser's day for them to put the little apron, or it'll be very difficult for them to tolerate the clippers when it's close to the ears. This is an example of a hierarchy. So again, when we said we wanted to break down on steps from easier to more complex, this is how it will look like. So for example, if we're cutting the hair with the scissors. Firstly, we want to have the scissors on the table and our child to tolerate that. Then we want to build that gradually to tolerate the hairdresser holding the scissors on site. Again, tolerating holding the scissors and having the blades open and close, and gradually move that up so when he can finally have a haircut. An example of a hierarchy, for example, when we have or when we use clippers, so kind of the same procedure. We start from easier steps and we go to more complex steps. And again, for example, in here, the duration. So we're taking into consideration maybe the clippers are on the first time for just 30 seconds, and then he tolerates 30 seconds on site but not in their head. And we build that gradually to having the clippers on in their head for 30 seconds, for example, then move it up to 1 minute, building up till they can have and tolerate the whole haircut. The hierarchy. It is good to write down the hierarchy beforehand, but be aware that you may need to add in special steps towards you doing some progress. So for example, you've written down a hierarchy. So again, with the haircutting example, the child needs to sit down, needs to be still. Firstly, you need to put the apron on, then they need to tolerate the clippers are on side and be building that again. But maybe you've noticed that it is more likely that you are successful in building up the steps is instead of turning the clippers on and then putting them in the head, you have a little play, you let your child play with the clippers and having them holding it and having the vibration on different parts of the body. So you might be able to change the hierarchy and add those steps. Another tip is like start where you're going to be successful. So for example, we were working on this 2 days ago and we managed to tolerate the clippers on the head of our child, but we haven't worked on it 2 days ago, so we want to start maybe a step before, so just getting out the clippers while they're on, having them on the table, and work through there. We don't want to start working because they tolerated it for 30 seconds in their head. We don't want to go in and have the clippers all around their head for 2 minutes. The aim of the hierarchy is for it to remain positive throughout your child. If they become upset or engage in behaviors that challenge, either the step is too hard or the reinforcement isn't strong enough. If this happens, stop, reevaluate, and adapt before proceeding. So we've been successfully going up the steps, but all of a sudden our child starts getting upset. We can just prompt communication, stop the clippers, and think, is the step too hard? Maybe we need to go back down and work again on the previous step, or simply we just need to top up the reinforcement. Now the sweet is not enough. Now he needs 2 sweets, or maybe he needs a little bit of chocolate because that's his favorite thing in the world. Reinforcement. During sessions, I've had the most success with having a reinforcement available so the child can hold it throughout, kind of like a distraction. For example, watching the TV or maybe playing with their favorite toy, and then having additional reinforcer while we are trying those specific steps, which can be like social praise for some children, or some tickles, a cuddle, or maybe a sweet, or a little bit of their milk. This obviously will differ from every child, but remember, reinforcement needs to be really strong. Usually the highest reinforcer would be preferred toys or edibles or the iPad. If they're not showing motivation for the item or response effort decreases the motivation, then the procedure will not work. So for example, if we're asking for them to do something very, very hard and we're just offering social praise, this procedure, it might not work. So we want to every time that we're going to run it, know that that reinforcement that we're going to use is going to be strong in that situation. For example, as well, if the kid has been the last 15 minutes accessing the iPad, then the reinforcement, it might be a bit lower because he's just had it for a bit of time. Maybe it's just not that strong and we need to think of something else. Visuals, something that can work for most of the children. And again, this might look different depending on every child. And some examples could be social stories, token boards, now and next boards, photos of what is happening to kind of then visualize. For example, these pictures of what is happening. So we can have a picture of a haircut or the scissors, and we can show them we're going to practice the haircut now, and we're going to be using some scissors, or we're going to have a haircut today and we're going to be using some clippers. Or the now and next board, for example, we're going to have an ear inspection, but then we're going to get some crisps, showing them the reward. Another example of visuals would be a token board, for example, kind of like explaining that we're going to have a haircut. And every time we get a token, we'll get, or when we get to the 10 token, we'll get a time with the computer or the iPad. And once we've done our 7 trials, the haircut will be finished and I can go. Another visual example would be, for example, social stories, kind of explaining them and giving them more vocabulary and a bit with more length what's going to happen during the haircut, and reassuring that everything's going to be okay, and that they can ask for help or to stop. Some considerations to take on, for example, are, well, there's loads of different products available suitable for different sensory preferences. So for example, we can have electric toothbrushes or manual. Nowadays we can get toothpaste with like all kinds of flavor. If, for example, your child is very limited with the diet, or even unflavored toothpaste. We can also find some products for tolerating injections that can reduce pain and that have been clinically proven. So for example, the BCB is like a little bee that holds an ice pack, and the ice pack with the BCB vibrating will be applied in your child's arm. And then the child will focus on that vibration and that cold area, and it is more likely to not feel pain when you're going to put an injection. Again, some more considerations. So graduated exposure and reinforcement can be tricky, and I would recommend consulting with a board certified behavior analyst, BCBA, beforehand in order to ensure that the process is as smooth as possible. It can be long and can take a while to show results, but the more gradual it is, the more likely you are to get the desired result. And now I'm just going to leave you with our families and their lovely stories and experiences with some of their children tolerance skills.
My little girl is Maggie and she is 3. She's been coming to Beyond Autism since September 2022. And when we first came here, on the first day, she had a big reaction to music books and any toys that made noise. She was very in escape mode, like wanted to run away from the room or covering her eyes, or just couldn't handle the situation. And then that started seeping in at home as well. She's got a younger brother, so he's always got noisy toys and noisy books, and she'd just scream and run and say no thank you. it was one of those things, you sort of go into spiral mode as a parent when you've got an autistic child, because you think of the future. It's like, well, in the world there's going to be noises that you can't always see where they are, and you know, if you go to school one day there's going to be kids making noise and you can't control that. So yeah, bit worrying, and especially when she's got a younger brother, there's no way to control the noise. So instantly, even before this first session had ended, the girls were saying, shall we, we'll have a look at putting targets in place and we can work through this, like this is absolutely fine. And what struck me is just how incremental it was, because I think when you think about modifying a behaviour, you think, oh, it's just going to be like that and done. It was such tiny steps, like starting off being in the room for 5 seconds and then up to 10 seconds, 15, and it was just, you look at it, it's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And just every stage the girls did, she could eventually get to. And it was just little by little, like for example, you know, we'd have the noisy book in one room, she'd be in another, so she could hear it and she'd be saying, no, you just have to say, no, I'm just playing with this here, you're okay to be in that room. And then, you know, kind of build it up that one day, after a lot of building up, so even just moving closer to the door of the room that she was in, just these tiny steps made such a difference. And it was all slow. It wasn't like you're just going to sit here and do it. It was all like, it's okay, you don't have to come and participate, but this is what's going to happen. And yeah, again, little by little, like noisier books, louder toys. And then just one day she woke up and came downstairs and went to the bookshelf, got the noisy book up and was doing all the animal sounds. It's just like, oh, she does this now, she's fine. And it was amazing. Just the girls were just like, yeah, they weren't even slightly phased by it. The girls were just like, oh yeah, she'll be fine with this in a few weeks, just give it time. And we do keep practicing, like we'll sometimes just a toy that she's not seen before that makes a noise. There is still a little bit of like, but she's also, the fact the girls have taught her to say, I need a break, it has been a huge help with her. And just like, I don't like it. The fact that they're kind of giving her, even like the visuals, she had visuals at first, but now she's just using it in her everyday language, like, I'm not okay with this. So she knows how to remove herself from a situation or get a situation to stop without just running away. Has been great. And it's really nice that we can we've had this big thing here because it was just so well handled and just so step by step, because everything seems so daunting and overwhelming at first when a behaviour you worry about. And yeah, now she's just, again, not phased. There's another thing that we'll probably have to work on, but the fact that you do sort of take that lesson and apply it to everything. Such as, okay, we're going to need to do this. Well, we can't just, even with dressing herself, the girl's like, you can't just expect someone to dress themselves. You start, you know, maybe 2 weeks with the socks, and then 2 weeks with this, and 2 weeks with that, and eventually she'll be able to do it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You see, the girls did amazing, and now that's one behaviour that we've completely got under wraps, and she's coping really well. They've just given her another coping strategy, which, when you're an autistic child, I can imagine is just all that you need, really.
So Eva, she hates like a fruit and veggie. I couldn't even eat next to her before. She was so upset when seeing the fruits. So what I learned here is how to manage her to touch the fruits and play with them. Because before I was just offering them on the plate and she was always pushing them, refusing, throwing them on the floor. So what I learned here is to like put the fruits in her play. So we started playing with like water, like making like a soup and adding fruits inside. Eva, she enjoys it, so we continue at home. We were like start to cut the fruits and put in the soup for mommy, for daddy. Everyone is eating now like fruits with pasta, with apples, with oranges. She's enjoying them now. She's still not eating them, but she will accept the fruits. So we're touching, playing. We're playing like football with the oranges. We're playing with the banana in the house. Mommy sometimes will peel off the banana. Eva, she likes peeling off, but she will not touch it yet. But she's enjoying this activity, so I think that's a big progress.
And so Matthew really struggled with people touching his ears, and that was a problem because he was being assessed by audiology to see if there was a problem with his hearing. And Matthew couldn't cope with the doctor putting the instrument that they use in his ears. And so I spoke to Sarah about it, and we started practicing. And we gave Matthew a tablet with his favourite show on, and he was sitting on a peanut ball, as Matthew really loves to run around all the time. And so that really helped give him the movement that he needs, but while sitting down. And then we worked really, really slowly. And so I think we had a little pretend instrument that goes in the ears from the doctor's sets. And so you show it to him first, and then you stop if he's very distressed. Like in the doctor's surgery, he was crying and trying to escape and trying to hit us and just doing everything he could to get away from that situation, because he really didn't want people touching his ears. It really scared him, I think. And yeah, and then we just really gradually built up. So I think first of all we're showing it to him, and then we're having someone touch his ears. And then again we stopped whenever he showed any sign of distress. And then we did it. When we did it, he also got some kind of award, like maybe he got his toy back, or he really likes numbers, so he had the next number in the line. Yeah, and we took a little break because we had something else to focus on, but then he had another ear assessment coming up in like a month's time, I think it was. And so we started working on it again. And yeah, we introduced massaging his ears as well beforehand, which really helped. And then we really focused on practicing at home for that month. And then we kind of did it, there's a quiet period during the day, like sometimes if you're watching TV in the afternoon, we'd be like, oh yeah, we can practice in your ears, or maybe after brushing his teeth, we'd be like, oh, we can practice doing this now, because yeah, I just tried to fit into you know, normal routines, just having a little practice and not making a big deal of it, and just stopping it whenever, you know, Matthew was getting uncomfortable, essentially. And we have made so much progress. It was really amazing. We've actually now been discharged from audiology because at the last appointment, my husband went with him and he just massaged his ears and he reassured him, and he was actually able to let the doctor look in his ears, and they said, yeah, they're all fine. And so now we don't have to go to audiology anymore. It's really good.
Jonathan, he's 3 and 8 months at the moment. The first time we realized he doesn't like clippers is when he was around a year and 10 months, 9 months. It was the time we tried the proper hair cutting, sitting him, use the cover and bring the clippers. He didn't react to sitting or covering him with the cover, but when the clippers touched his head, he screamed, he hated it, and there was goosebumps all over his body and his face, his neck. So yeah, that was the moment we realized that he doesn't like the vibration or the noise of the clippers. And so since then it's been a challenge. And when we start coming to here Beyond Autism, they start giving us tips and step by step, putting the clippers on, touching his head, yeah, just putting the clippers near him without putting it on, without the vibration, then with the vibration. And slowly he was making progress, but it was very, very slow. It was like a year. Just before the half term in February, was it? Sarah came with a new plan, with Makaton. And he didn't know what we were doing, because when we put the clippers on and put it on his lap or his leg, and he tolerates it, and we give him one car. He loves cars. That's the reinforcement we use always. And so that was my homework during the half term for me to do at home. And yes, we started. But then I have another toddler, 22 months at the moment. It wasn't easy with him around to use the Makaton. And so I changed the technique. What Jonathan does, whatever Isaac, his brother, is having, he wants to have it. And so I started using the clippers as a toy, giving it to Isaac, put he on Isaac's head. And so he wants to say, I want to have it too. My turn, mommy's turn, Isaac's turn. Then he starts grabbing it, at least he's touching it without putting it on. And so we were taking turns, and then gradually I started putting it on, the vibration. At first he wasn't really, he didn't like it, but gradually he seems to be okay with it. Then I started putting the clippers on Isaac's head when it's on. Isaac loves it. And so Jonathan starts to say, my turn, mommy's turn, my turn. And so yeah, it seems to work a little bit. We always have reinforcement, nursery rhymes that he loves, Cocomelon and things, the small cars, fruit that he loves. And so when we try to give him a haircut, we put a tablet in front of him, and his dad is with him. When the crying gets a little bit, loud, and the kicking, and that, we stop cutting the hair, and give him a car. And he loves grapes, so grape. And we carry on like that. Stop and go, stop and go. The final haircut wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad at all, comparing to how he was at the beginning. But the challenge now, what I noticed, the last haircut we gave him, is when he knows that he's going to have a haircut, when we sit him on the chair and the cover, he doesn't like that bit now. But when he's playing and I put the clippers on his head with the vibration on, he seems okay. It doesn't bother him anymore. And now my plan is to give him a haircut when he's just relaxed, not just, put him in the chair, put the cover on, because the knowing that it's going to happen makes him more nervous and anxious. So I want to avoid it, and my plan next time is just give the haircut when he was just sitting on the floor and playing and relaxed. Last session, last week, when we tried the hair clipping at the session with Marta, I put the clippers back and forth as I'm giving him a haircut, and it was completely okay. He was just looking at the tablet, playing with the cars. He didn't react. So I think he's going to be okay eventually. Yeah. To get here, we were practicing every single day, twice a day, for 10 or 15 minutes for months and months and months.